Dennis, you're here today. Something must be brewing. You good, Marcel? So, yes. Yeah, sure. Today is a purely party press conference. So thank you for being here. The past year has been no different than many other years in political terms. We have seen APNU using the same old arguments that they have perfected over the years, trying to mislead the people of this country. And so as a political party, and since this is the last press conference of the year as General Secretary of the party, I think it's necessary for me to put a lot of the attempt of APNU to refashion itself, to recreate its image in a manner to mislead people without changing the substance of what they have always believed in and they continue to practice, that we need as a political party to expose this. As an entire generation of Guyanese grew up under the People's Progressive Party, they're now very familiar with the political history of the country. They may have read it, but they did not live through it. And so they cannot relate to issues of lack of freedom, lack of democracy, dictatorship, economic deprivation wrought by bad policies practiced by that was the result of bad economic policies of the government. They can't relate to those issues in a manner that is through experience, only through books and maybe reading. And many people don't even take time to familiarize themselves with our economic and political history. So many times I speak to young people, and they would never believe that at one time in this country you could go to prison from eating bread made from wheat, that the police will come and check your pots if you cook potato or peas, or you had a can of sardines. People had to eat the can of sardine, bury the can somewhere, or dump it far from the home, because if you're caught with the can, you end up in the police station. I have a friend whose parents, they had a bakery, and whose parents were dragged off. He was a little child, left alone at home because both of his parents were taken by the police because they were baking bread made from wheat. And so if you talk to young people today, they would think this is a different part of the world. But that happened here in Guyana in not such a distant past. And growing up, like seeing the army come on election day and taking over the polling places, throwing out all the officials, taking over the boxes, the ballot boxes, and then taking them to a different point where often when the count was done, they found wads of ballots strapped with a rubber band in the box itself. And APNU used to win at that time. Like 80% of the votes in the country. In my village, which is a PPP stronghold, APNU would get 95% of the votes. And seeing people cry out of frustration was something that many people in contemporary Guyana cannot relate to. So 2020 was an eye-opener for many young people. Many people who thought that what their parents told them was a distant bad memory and that it could never happen again in our country. That many of them used to say to their parents, "Oh, you're talking ancient history." APNU proved in 2020 that it never changed. It never changed. That for nearly 3 decades it stayed in office through stealing elections. And then the first chance they got at power again in the 2015 to 2020 period, they sought to rig those elections again. And so we must never forget this. That's the nature of the political party we're dealing with. I have here the COI, the International Commission of Inquiry into the general and regional elections of Guyana that were held on March 2020. And this document just reinforces all that we know in this country. But if there was any doubt about it, the findings were very clear. And so if you look at the findings, I'm just going to read a couple of the conclusions in the summary of finding. 1, there was a conscious and deliberate, even brazen, effort to violate the provisions of Section 84(1) of the Representation of People Act. Now, that's the act under which elections are conducted in Guyana. 2, senior GCOM officials abandoned all need for neutrality and impartiality and demonstrated a bias for a competing political party. And in the course of events over those days, showed an open connection with that party, and by their efforts sought a desired result for that party. That's the People's National Congress, APNU, AFC. CEO, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, DCO, Ms. Roxanne Myers, and RO, Mr. Claremont Mingo, were principally responsible for clear and deliberate attempts to frustrate, obstruct, and subvert the ascertainment of votes in Electoral District Number 4. notwithstanding that GCOM had specifically decided that the approved method for ascertaining and tabulation of votes cast for the respective competing political parties was to be by the comparative examination of SOPs. The CEO nevertheless approved the use of a spreadsheet, which turned out to be a document, the information on which was substantially inconsistent with that on the SOPs in the possession of party agents. There appears to be much collusion and collaboration between senior GCOM officials as to likely amount to conspiracy to make what was undoubtedly a premature and unlawful declaration of falsified results, which showed the APNU AFC party as the winner of electoral district number 4. This was the ultimate goal of the CEO, the DCO, and RO. I can go on. Now, that's documentary evidence of the stealing or the attempt to steal the 2020 elections here in an international COI. If you go back to the past, you will see Lord Avebury report and many other reports that documented the history of stealing elections in Guyana. So, one thing is very clear today, that the party, that the PNC AFC never really changed in the past maybe 30, 40 years. They've always tried to stay in power through or have stayed in power through stealing elections. But what is particularly egregious is the attempt to paint themselves as the Democrats in our society, that they're the ones concerned about freedom, the probity of the electoral roll, that is the list of voters, which they always have concerns about. They're very good at that sort of projection, but the reality is this is a party that steals elections. You recall, until today, I can't see how anyone could listen to a Ramjatan or a Kati Hughes or anyone of that ilk who stood up before the people of this country and sought to justify the stealing when they knew, based on their own statements of poll, that they had lost the elections. And privately, they admitted this. They were, you would recall, the issue of the Russians, that the Russian hackers came and tried to help the PPP steal the elections. So today when I see a Ramjatan speaking or a Katiyu speaking, I know that they have no credibility whatsoever. Now, we can easily say this was history. But in 2023, we also had local government elections. And again, we saw an attempt to, first of all, block those local government elections, and then to stop them using the court. The phone is vibrating again. So two cases were filed by Carol Joseph. One was, in fact, by the APNU. One was on the boundaries, and two, the voters list. and both cases were thrown out by the court. If they had succeeded in those cases, we wouldn't have had elections, local government elections in 2023. So, but what were the results of the local government elections? And that was another seminal event in the country. Of the 1,220 seats that were contested, the PPP won 906. APNU 275, and the others 39 seats, which is 74% of all the seats contested in the country. We won 67 of the 80 LAAs. We increased our votes in Kwakwani, Mucka, Linden, Georgetown, New Amsterdam, and in Bartica and Madhya, we won those two areas. In every one of APNU's strongholds, we won more votes. And these were Afro-Guyanese communities, mainly, that the PPP expand its strength in. So one thing today is very clear, that the only political party that has shown progression through free and fair elections, winning support across race in this country, is the People's Progressive Party. In almost all the Amerindian communities where we had elections, local government elections, contested in Letem and Aranaputa in Region 9, we won those outright. They didn't even contest. In Matthews Ridge and Port Kaituma and Maburuma, we increased our support. Almost every, in Madhya also we won there. So almost every Amerindian community, we increased our support. We increased our support in areas where Afro-Guyanese live predominantly, the areas I mentioned. And in the Indo-Guyanese communities, we also did extremely well. APNU did not contest in many of them. So it is today the only political party that can demonstrate through its record and its support that it's the National Party of Guyana. No other political party can do that in this country. And it has done so through its work and through fair means. Didn't rig elections to do that. So that, if you contrast the record of the two parties, we have always fought for freedom in this country. In the dark days of APNU, when we didn't have any democracy in Guyana, many of our people were jailed. Many lost their lives. Walter Rodney, there was another COI, he was from the WPA. He was killed by the APNU government because of fighting for freedom for this country. Father Dark was killed. Many others fought for freedom in this land. And in 2022, without the PPP leading that fight, in every single form, if we didn't stand firmly in this country, of course, supported by a lot of NGOs and the smaller parties and the international community, but led by the People's Progressive Party, today we would have been living in a country that would have been an international pariah, would have been like Venezuela possibly, and many people would have been fleeing here, oil or no oil, because that is where APNU was taking us. So as we end 2023, let us never forget that the people who have always sought to take away our freedom has been this political party, and it has remained unchanged. Imagine unapologetic about this history. They've been unapologetic. They filed 2 petitions. The first one was thrown out for lack of service that went all the way to the CCJ. And then the other petition that Roysdale Ford, this is a poor lawyer, Roysdale Ford, he lost almost every single case that he has filed in court. He's always wrong. He's wrong on this summon to Burke too. But he lost the case because they were challenging Order 60. And anyone who knew or followed the election cases closely would have known that tangentially the CCJ had already looked at Order 60 when they made their ruling that led to some of the reversals here, so that Lowenfield could not have done what he did, which was unilaterally disenfranchise 175,000 people based on a Court of Appeal ruling. So they should have known that that would have been thrown out too. But they still, until now, Norton still hangs on to this lie that they won the elections, they were cheated in 2020, that he has the statements of poll. They file election petition in the face of all of these facts as COI and what we know as in our hearts that they were stealing the elections. But that will not change about APNU. And they tried to pull that again they were unrepentant. In 2023 in local government elections, after this crushing defeat, you recall Norton saying before the elections they were contesting in practically all of the LAAs, which was a lie. They were not contesting in nearly half of the seats. That was a lie. He stood before the media. They doubled down on it. Sure, some Holder guy, some guy from his party there, the chairman, I think, said, he said it again, repeated it. When they lost the elections, they said they won. Then subsequently, when the facts hit them that they lost 6 to 7 of the 8 LAAs, they started saying that we rigged the elections. So this is not going to change. Anyone who associates with that party is associating with a party that have, since independence, stood on the side of stealing elections, not working for people's support. When you're in power, you have to work for their support through your policies. You have to get them to support you because you look after their concerns. They never did that. They believe that you can just steal the elections. So that's the first thing I wanted at the end of the year, to show you a clear difference between the two parties. One party that has fought for freedom from independence, if you trace our history, to keep our country free, and another party that has moved to enslave, to take away our freedom, enslave our people. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is this racism, which has always been a potent tool of APNU again. So this year has not been short of manifestation of them claiming racism again, that the PPP is a racist party, in spite of all that I just told you, that we have won support across the board in this country. They continue to pursue this lie. So they had several activities in Washington, the Washington conference. When pressed at the conference, they said they didn't have evidence. They ended the conference with one thing, which is that the US must sanction Jagdeo. They then had the fact finders, the so-called fact finders, come to Guyana. They chaperoned them, they came with a preconceived idea, and apparently they came here to find evidence to support that. And that is why they were led by Roysdale Ford and the others, taken around by APNU to just strongholds of the APNU AFC, New Amsterdam, Linden, and at Critchlow Labour College. At each of these places, they were confronted with a changed People's Progressive Party, because the people who confronted them about APNU's lies and the lack of credibility in what they were saying were supporters from these communities who were Afro-Guyanese themselves. They became very inconvenient to the fact-finding mission, so they were not given a chance to speak, to demonstrate that the only racist party in Guyana is APNU. And so the fact-finders left the country, and no doubt they will produce a jaundiced report not reflective of this, what really took place. So today, until now, this party cannot move away from its history of using race to divide our people. And that's another defining characteristic of the People's National Congress. It's a elite-based party, race-based party. It can't cross a threshold. And therefore, today, if you look at the ERC, we don't have a single case filed before the ERC now, which is the constitutional body for discrimination. That is where you could have gone to file cases. If there was such a big set of discrimination in this country, you can use the two mechanisms that are there to address this, the ERC or our courts. And I would urge them to do that, but they are not interested in finding real cases of discrimination where they exist. And I'm not saying they do not exist. I'm saying that it's not institutionalized, because the People's Progressive Party has ensured that we work to make sure that all of our institutions serve all of our people. But there could be cases of individual acts of discrimination. I'm not saying they don't exist. That's where we would all be interested in finding those cases and making sure they don't survive. But APNU is not interested in that. They're interested in propaganda. What are the facts? The facts are that all of our people, since the PPP has got back into office, have more jobs, including Afro-Guyanese, more jobs. All of our people have more access to housing, including Afro-Guyanese. All of our people have more access to scholarships, including Afro-Guyanese. All of our people have seen a growth in disposable income, including Afro-Guyanese. All of our people have seen improvement in social and economic infrastructure, including Afro-Guyanese. Our children, all of them are treated better. They got back their money. Our pensioners, the people living with disabilities, those are the facts. Those are the facts. You contrast our record with that of APNU. Again, in this area, we didn't go to, you didn't see the government start firing people in Linden, which is an APNU stronghold. Contrast with what they did in the Sugar Belt. In fact, we extended 1,550 persons are working on a part-time program in Linden who didn't have not a full-time nor part-time job when the PPP got into office in August of 2020. You're going to have 1,400 people in Linden who will have access to a piece of land and a house under this government. because that's what we're doing there. When you didn't have a single new housing scheme being built in Linden on the Apnu. That's the difference. So, again, it is necessary for me to point out, as General Secretary of this party, the differences between the two political parties. One that uses racism as a weapon to get people to support them, and they're not interested in fighting racism wherever it exists. And we must do that. But they're interested in using it as a political tool. But the fact of the matter is that we have seen this. And this all follows like, so therefore, they then have these surrogates, having argued that the PPP steals elections, and then this country the parties are race-based. Then the next thing is that we must find a different model for governance. So guess where that comes from? This is the natural flow. So Gulsaran has resurfaced now, spoken about the elections petition, what APNU did, and then this is his conclusion. Considering that the two major political parties derive their support almost exclusively from the two main ethnic groups in the country, the winner-takes-all policy is not working. Whichever group wins the election, the other group feels left out in the process of managing the affairs of the state as well as national building. In some cases, it feels discriminated against, especially as regards employment opportunities and the award of government contracts. In the circumstances, an alternative model of democratic governance needs to be put in place. And then it says, both the major political parties have been guilty of engaging in window dressing. So this is a condescending thing too. So the model of governance now comes into question. Not that the premise is wrong, that one party is exclusively race-based and the other party is working. I set this as a goal. In opposition, we said it clearly, the PPP is underrepresented in the Afro-Guyanese communities, and we will work very hard to ensure that that changes. You have seen it changing in the party. You have seen the support grow. Instead of him urging the PNC to move away from their racism, he believes, so he equates the two parties the same, oh, both are the same, and then says, oh, they're engaged in window dressing. There's no window dressing in the PPP. Mark Phillips, as the Prime Minister, has a substantive portfolio, weighty portfolio, and you see him exercising that. 3 or 4 sectors fall under him compared to Nagamutu. We have the Minister of Public Works who controls the largest budget in this country, Edghill. A Minister of Home Affairs who now has a combined ministry, unlike under APNU, where Ramjatan had half of a ministry and Felix had the other half. We have now a Minister of Tourism and Industry who is Afro-Guyanese, Minister of Labor. I can go on. Substantive portfolio, foreign affairs. These are substantive portfolios. There's not window dressing. You look at it across the country. Substantive, unlike APNU. And so I need to point out contrasts, the contrast between the two parties. But people like Gulsara and others who survive because they have no credibility whatsoever. And he sued me because I said he has no credibility. So I'm looking forward to the court case to prove that he has no credibility. I pointed out some of the arguments before, but they survive on this thing like oh, both parties are the same. Both parties are not the same. They're not the same. For all the reasons that I've outlined and further. For example, we have a development plan for the country. APNU has zero plan. We have a vision for this country. You try to listen to their vision for economic vision for the country. We have an oil and gas strategy. Ask them, they're waiting for 2025 to outline theirs. They had one, I don't know what they had in 2016, because let me don't use that word. They messed up everything. So we're not the same. So people like Golsaran and others thrive on this sort of thing. Oh, the two parties are the same. They steal elections, we fight for freedom. 2, they're race-based, we fight to bring our people together. 3, we have a clear plan for the country. They have nothing whatsoever, nothing whatsoever. That's the contrast that we're talking about today, and that's the state of affairs of this country and the political structures of this country. They're disastrous. They have nothing. Look, Sabbok News was trying to be a little bit helpful to say they launched their development strategy, a 3-pager with 5 generic points. I think they wanted to be a little benign, but it's a waste of time. It's like not even the preamble to our development strategy. No clarity on anything. As I said before, you can ask me about any sector here now at this press conference, and I'd be able to tell you what our end point in every one of these sectors would be. If it's mining or forestry or agriculture or health or education, we have an end point, an end goal, and it all fits together in a coherent strategy. And the finances, we manage the finances in a manner consistent with that end point that will see major prosperity for all of our people, but we have to work towards it. So we manage our finances in a manner which sometimes some people don't like because they think we should use it all up now. But if you do that, we're not going to achieve that end point. And so sometimes we have to talk to people about it, because a country doesn't get rich overnight. It gets rich if you work towards it and you have clarity of vision and you manage your finances in a proper manner. And that's what we do. We explain it. The last time I came here, I explained why we cannot every year give all the money we collect in public sector wages increases alone. That there's so many other competing demands and things that are necessary to ensure future prosperity so that we can sustain the public service salaries in the future, whatever happened, notwithstanding the fact that we could lose the output from the oil and gas industry, we could face lower prices, we'd still be able to sustain the higher wages and salaries, because we're making the investments now necessary, the other types of investments. You don't want to be able to sustain it for one day and then later it gets wiped out through inflation. You recall Suriname? One time Suriname had a massive, their public sector wages were very high. And then the exchange rate in Suriname went from the dollar was stronger, the Surinamese guilder was stronger than the Guyanese dollar, and then went to 3,000 guilders to $1 US. What do you think it did for public sector wages? It just wiped it out. Because they had windfalls in the past. They were getting windfalls from the gold sector, from oil and gas, from royalties from other areas. And look what has happened. You just need to look around. So you would not hear us every week at a press conference be convenient blow in the wind, try to latch on to a populist issue. So this issue is popular for the weak, public service wages. Let's go and make an outrageous claim, oh, you should give them 30% or 100%, etc., because it wins you popularity for a week. That's not consistent with achieving a long-term vision. And we do have a long-term vision, and they don't have. So there are differences between their parties. I'll come back to that. We can talk about corruption, and people talk a lot about that. In 2015, before APNU won the elections, they claimed we were stealing hundreds of billions of dollars every year. Actually claimed that, including Gulsuran. Billions, $45 billion per year. You know the figures. They couldn't justify $1 billion. They thought that everybody would be locked up. They said the whole cabinet. In fact, they took everybody from Roger Luncheon, who couldn't even walk, to Soku, arrested him at my office, was using a wheelchair to carry him there, to Soku. Every single person, Sam Hines, the Ramatar, every single member of the cabinet in the past. And they couldn't find anything to make cases. Today, we have had to probably just focus on the big cases. We have a number of specific instances, like Winston Jordan. There are about 5 cases where they transfer lands without collecting money, large sums, tracts of land. Patterson, a number of them. Cathy Hughes, I pointed out, we haven't even gone after her. She had her own company awarding contracts to her own company in her ministry and falsely claiming to the media and everybody else, and they reported this, all the media, including the Starbuck News, that she said she had distanced herself from the company since they came into office in 2015. But she was still in 2019 signing checks on behalf of the company. And we have the documentary evidence. We've had to just move on. For 3 years, unprecedented since the year 2000, we never submitted, ministers didn't submit their income and assets to the Integrity Commission. And guess which 3 years were those? 3 years on the APNU, from 2015 to 2018. Those are the first 3 years. Still large sums of money missing many places, etc. GDF, you recall the fuel scam, whole range of stuff. So we have had to refashion all of these issues. Big contrast. They talk a lot about corruption. But that turned out, the 5 years turned out to be the most corrupt government in our history. And I can demonstrate it. We have over maybe 400 cases of breaches of the financial regulations or outright fraud. We can't even get some of these cases heard. Look at the election fraud case. The reports are all clear about Lowenfield and his role, Roxanne Myers and her role, and Mingo. We can't even get the cases to move forward in court. Because somehow and magistrates have this new way of recusing themselves every time you have some of these political cases coming up. They didn't recuse themselves in cases that when the PPP was in office. In fact, you recall what happened to Brassington and Ashney Singh. They were placed in chains and taken to the court. And you know why? For selling the land on which Movie Tongue is for $20 million, when the highest bid price at that time was $16 million. They were taken in court in chains. changed. And every one of the charges, they had like, I don't know, 9 charges. Every one, they were placed on a $2 million bail. Now I see Jordan sold a facility that's worth 30-something million US dollars for $100,000. And I think his bail was like maybe $100,000 kind of dollars. The duplicity here, duplicity of it all. So let's make it clear that this party talks a lot about corruption, but was in the 5 years period, because we have short memories sometimes. People forget Durban Park. There's 600 million missing through the audit, and probably another 600 million in donations that were missing. But 600 million of public money missing. So on that project, it's between 1.2 to 1.4 billion dollars. And look what's happening. It's falling apart now. So billions were spent on those projects. We forget this. And that's why today I need to remind people, because we don't have to go back to the 28 years when APNU was in office. A lot of young people say it's the past. It is the recent history I'm talking about. The recent history when they took away almost, when this country was, people who supported them used to come to the office and was just drying up by the day. Jobs were shrinking. They were taking away benefits from pensioners. Almost the whole country. There was this malaise in the 5 years that they were there. There was no excitement about this country. And people need to project themselves back to that period. So this is their track record. By contrast, this year has seen a major progress under the PPP. So what are some of the things we have achieved? Now, over the course of the next couple of days, I spoke with the ministers even today, and so you're going to see a slew of press conferences before the end of the year by the ministers speaking about their sectors, and you will see the vast progress we have made in almost every sector since we assumed office. But I want to also re-emphasize, why is this magnified? Why the progress has been even greater, in my view, than what seems apparent to many people, is because of the circumstances in which they were achieved, or their success was achieved. First of all, we had to overcome a period when $419.5 billion was spent by APNU without any parliamentary approval. From the budget of 2018, the last budget, to when we produced the budget in 2020, September 2020. For the whole of that period, that was $419.5 billion was spent without parliamentary oversight. A lot of expenditures were made for the whole of 2020 without any approval of the parliament. So in 4 weeks thereafter we got into office, in the middle of a shutdown in this country, shut down because we were fighting an existential threat, COVID. In 4 weeks, we produced a budget. I will go back. I just want you to look at the measures in the first budget and look at our manifesto and see that in the first budget, 4 weeks after we got into office, in the middle of COVID, we fulfill almost 70% of our manifesto promises we in the first budget. It's not an easy thing. The year and a half after we got into office, we were engaged on two fronts: on planning, getting the projects going, looking at the big projects, doing all the feasibility studies, etc., because they had to be done, raising the financing, and keeping our country safe, building out a capacity to vaccinate people, to get the medical system up, the testing capability, a whole range of things, getting money delivered, food delivered to many vulnerable communities, cash grants, all of this in the middle of COVID. It's a model case of how it's been done. You compare this with many other countries. And we just got into office, so we had to overcome the problems that they left us with of a financial nature. Two, we had to tackle COVID, the shutdown, and reopen our country in a phased manner, get people back to work and also keep them safe. And then thirdly, to implement what we promised to the people of this country. And so if you look at, this is just over 3 years we've been in office, but the first year and a half practically of that was we were focused on keeping our country safe. And in spite of that, we've managed to change the dynamics of this country. If you look at every single report, not coming out of APNU and what some low guy that they have as their economists, but look at ECLAC report, look at the World Bank report, Inter-American Development Bank, the IMF reports. Every single report has shown that not only has the economy been growing at record pace, but all the things we manage in spite of that growth to avoid the overheating of the economy, the high rates of inflation that some countries experience. So even when you talk about a growth in cost of living in Guyana, and Starbuck has been running this series, comparatively with the rest of the world, including the Caribbean and the United States of America, our prices have gone up less than many of those countries because of the countervailing measures we took on the taxes, by removing taxes, by changing the base on which taxes are levied, like using the old CIF value instead of new CIF value when freight rates skyrocketed. A whole range of those things help to keep the cost of living lower than what the global average, and more so in an economy where you had massive sorts of investment, which tends to impact on prices trending upwards when you have that sort of economic growth or the scale of investments that we have experienced in this country. Today, more of our people, in this short period, we have more of our people working. I told you already, we had said 50,000 jobs. More people are working now. We have labor shortages. We're in an enviable position. We are now, even some types of investments we are not pursuing. We have practically put a hold on future big projects until we go past this phase of completion of all the highways that we've had. We are working now on a few highways, the East Coast, going to the Soosdijk Highway, extending from Busby Dam to Soosdijk, completing the Crane Bypass, the bridges and stuff like that. Those big projects, the 12 hospitals we want completed before we get into the next wave of projects. And all of this is happening in spite of the challenges we face. And so the ministers are going to point out in great detail the massive amount of work we have done on drainage and irrigation and on structures and all of these issues to better manage our ability to control water. We've done this in those difficult circumstances, overcoming the election, the expenditure pattern before the elections, the unpaid bills left. We've overcome all of that, COVID, etc. Secondly, this year we've had the biggest anywhere in the world sale of forest carbon. And it happened because of work we did since we got back into office. This year, it came to fruition because from the time we got into office, we resumed a process of certification of our forests. And this year, we got the credits issued, and we sold some of those credits and for $750 million, the biggest deal anywhere in the world. That is a major achievement, too. On the oil and gas side, in spite of all that kite news goes on with, the nonsense we've had to contend with during the course of the year, if you look at every assessment from the international community, you will, including the IMF reports, you will see that it's one of the better managed industries anywhere in the world, and that the pace at which we have changed the framework has been unprecedented for many countries in the world. We have done all that we have said we will do in this sector in terms of the framework agreement. We went for the gas to energy project as a way of getting more from the contract. We passed the local content law, which is a way of getting more from the contract. Let me tell you the assessment of a lot of people, including the oil and gas executives. When they come and see the levels of investment and participation of Guyanese, they don't believe it, because their experience is that in many of these countries where the oil and gas industry goes to, guess who owns the buildings that they're renting? The foreigners. The foreigners come in, they own the building. Almost all the things that they supply, food, everything else, security services, taxi services, come from foreign companies. Our local content law is unprecedented in such an early period. In any country where they have just had a fledgling industry and the level of integration. The big facilities, look at warehousing. Warehousing is owned by foreigners. Almost all of the warehousing now facilities, Guyanese are investing in them, and massive amounts of money they make on rentals. Two, we have 3 of the shore-based facilities that are being built now, all 3 with the majority Guyanese ownership. These are massive investments. Any part of the world you go, you see it's foreigners who own these 2. Security services, rental services. The last week I had to deal with this thing about remittances and about the massive inflow that we've seen through Guyanese who live abroad, who are investing here now for the supply of the oil and gas industry. The level of integration and spending is unprecedented in a country that has just started an oil and gas sector. Trinidad was doing this nearly 100 years ago, or Venezuela. We've just started producing oil maybe 4 years ago. And we already have that massive level of integration because we ran ahead of what the oil and gas sector wanted. They did not want the local content law. They didn't want to give us the free gas for the gas to energy project. We got that. We got the local content law passed. We got a reform of the NRF to the extent that it's used as a model in many parts of the world for transparency and oversight. We have a strong oversight mechanism for the Natural Resources Fund now, strengthened oversight. We now have a new petroleum activities law updating the one from 1986. We have auctioned now our blocks. It's not on a first come, first served basis. We've reformed our PSA. We've dealt with almost the whole industry. So it's model management, in spite of what you hear, Kaichor News, ring fencing all day long, the same nonsense that you hear. It's one of the better managed industries in any part of the world. We have strengthened our environmental permits to a point where we're way ahead of the world in terms of ending flaring, etc. So great progress in that sector too. Not just the low carbon development strategy, which we're leading, but also in managing the oil and gas sector. I can go on to talk about the macro achievements. I don't want to, because what will happen is that the ministers will go into much greater detail sector by sector in the achievements of the year. So first of all, I had to point out that we're a different party than the opposition. We believe in freedom and fighting on free and fair elections. We believe in working for all of our people. We fight racism. We have a plan, economic plan for the country. On those issues, they're on the opposite side. And so how viable are they? Can they ever take office without dealing with these issues? It would be disastrous for our country. I've pointed out about the progress we have made in spite of all of the odds stacked against us. Now, I just want to quickly, and some of the odds are, I can understand they come from APNU, etc. But we are not fighting also APNU. Sometimes when we engage in robust criticism of some of what goes on social media, people think that the party should just allow people to say what they want. Now, we believe in free speech. This party believes in free speech. This party believes in a free media. It believes in a free society. But we will fight people with all of our strength, whichever quarters they come from, who seek to divide our people along ethnic lines and to reverse the progress that we have made, and who tried to take away our freedom. These are non-negotiables for us. We have no apology for fighting these individuals who tried to mislead our nation into doing things or clouding people's judgment so that they make wrong choices. We point out alternatives. So we have, outside of the formal opposition, we have had a lot of those coming from some wild people. Rickford Burke and some of the others fall in this category. They have nothing good. They live abroad. They have nothing good to say about our country. They sow divisions, discord every single day by their comments. They use social media as a weapon against the government, but also against private citizens of our country. They use social media as a means of extorting people. And clearly, this can't be free speech. This can't be protected speech. This cannot be this area of criminality, because it's criminal what they're doing. That they should get a free pass whilst everyone else in this country would have to account to the laws of the country. So I'm so pleased that we could actually start holding people accountable for what they say. Now people can say whatever they wish. Rickford Burke or whoever else can say whatever they wish. But if it's seditious, if you're in Guyana and you say this and it's seditious, you have to face the court. They too must face the account or be held accountable. And so I was so pleased. I saw the opposition saying they support Rickford Burke and that the PPP wants to silence its critics. We're not saying he should remain silent. He could speak as much as he wants to. But you must, if it crosses the border of criminality, you have to face the law like anyone else. But what the opposition is doing, they're supporting, one of the charges that Rickford Burke has. And we have credible evidence now. In fact, solid evidence that he was part of the plot to extort a businessman money, and he's charged for that. So APNU wants to prevent a man. APNU supports extortion of businessmen, basically, because they don't want him to face trial for extortion of money from a businessman. Now, I know that this is probably what APNU wants. This is not about free speech alone. This is about extortion. In the United States of America and any part of the world, you go to jail for long periods. So I saw Rosedale Ford, and he has a proclivity to put his foot in his mouth, apart from losing many, many cases. I don't know what sort of senior counsel this man is. Like he just misses everything, the key points. So I think I want to thank Sanjeev Dattadin for clarifying one issue, a simple issue, where he says, and I'm going to quote from him, that the summons are different than warrants, which seek to arrest or detain someone for him to be produced in court. It was not a warrant that was served on Rickford Burke. It was a summon to attend court. The summon, it goes on, Sanjeev Dattadin's letter said, it is to satisfy the court that the defendant is aware of the proceedings and is given the opportunity to be heard. He could choose not to attend. So Rickford Burke now knows, based on his antics, that there is a court case for his extortion matter on a particular date. Everybody has publicized that now. He knows this. The summons was served on him. He could choose not to attend. He could choose not to come here. But the court now, once the court knows he was served, he was given an opportunity to attend, the trial can proceed. He can't later say, oh, I didn't know about it, I didn't have a chance at fair representation. There's no warrant issue for his arrest. So this Rosedale Ford, a very mediocre lawyer in my view, very mediocre lawyer. Sanjeev Dattadin is not a senior counsel, but I think he should have been the senior counsel in this case. Pointed this minor but major difference. Minor but major difference between the two, a summon and a warrant. So with all his antics now, he knows that he was, he knows there's a court case. He could come to Guyana. Actually, I'm looking forward to him coming to Guyana to, to defend all he's been saying. And you know, he said a lot on social media about the government and about criminality, etc. So he says it on social media. I think he would have proof of all of these things, could easily present them in court about the racist PPP and the criminality of the PPP, etc. He could produce those in court too whilst he's here. So I hope that the other social media influencers who are operating under the guise that they're not in our jurisdiction and they feel safe abroad, safe from the reach of our law, that they're taking note to. And I hope that anyone that they malign, people who they malign, you sue them now and get somebody to serve, hire somebody abroad, authorize people to serve them the notice or the summon, and you make sure they video it like they did with Rickford Burke, and then you go proceed in court so that the trial could take place. That would be very interesting now. People should be responsible for what they post and what they say. If you're so certain that you have all the facts, then by all means, you don't have to worry about being sued, or you don't have to worry about legal action because you can defend yourself. But it's when they fabricate things about people, destroying people's families, and also trying to extort them using information they may have gleaned from third-party sources, or when they just outright, try to destroy this country or break the laws, they now have to address these matters. So I'm very pleased about that. But APNU now supports Rickford Burke, but what effectively they're supporting is someone not facing an extortion charge. So they're supporting criminality. Now, another group of people that we have had to deal with, and this is more organized and more pernicious. So from last week, I brought out all of these. So, from last week, the Peeping Tom, since I said Peeping Tom is a coward because they're hiding behind being anonymous from that last week. So I seen quite a few stories from Peeping Tom. So it's Jagdeo is being fallacious and flippant. After the oil is gone, Jagdeo doesn't have a national depletion policy. Jagdeo does not get it. Jagdeo on remittances. Is Jagdeo bubble about to burst? This is all this week. I'm like very popular with this Peeping Tom. So, the bubble, Marcel, I'm very popular over there in Kaichor News and Peeping Tom. So, Guyana's high forest cover to obtain financing through the sale of forest. If the forest carbon markets collapse, it will bring an ignominious end to the international career of Bharrat Jagdeo. Really? I didn't know I was building an international career on the forest carbon markets. In fact, I just said we've had the biggest deal in the world. If this collapses, my whole international career will disappear. Ignominious end to the international career. Is Jagdeo bubble about to burst. This is the forest carbon. Now, I express concern about it here myself for the reasons any sane person would know what I'm saying, that we have moved ahead in spite of this, in spite of the forest carbon markets not doing well. But this is one. So, the national depletion policy. We've dealt with this depletion policy already. Our depletion policy, let me state it again, it sounds a bit crude in the context of net zero. It is to get as much of the resources out of the ground that oil sold and the money saved for the future are being used to reorient our economy to one that does not rely on fossil fuels in the future. That's our depletion policy. Consistent with that, we are licensing all the new FPSOs at an expeditious pace, but with due regard for safety to ensure that we can do this. We do not want to lose that window of opportunity that is closing on other countries. It's clear as daylight. That's our depletion policy. We are even now trying to accelerate exploration in the other blocks outside of a Stabroek block. We've said that. What could be clearer than that? And we not only said what the depletion policy is, but why we need to do that and what we want to use the resources for. Save, you need to transfer the resources from crude assets, that's crude oil assets, which may not have a price in the future or a place in the market, to financial assets or infrastructural assets or social assets. That is the transformation we are seeing and we are hoping to achieve in this window. It's clear as daylight. So there is it for your depletion policy. We made it clear, 100 times. So enough, please, Jagdeo is being fallacious and flippant. The example I'm using last week, they said I use a wrong example to compare it with a home. All I'm saying that anywhere in the world and every unit of management, whether it's at a business level, a home, a country, or even in heaven. Well, no, heaven has unlimited resources. So, here on earth, you have to manage and live within your means. That's all I'm saying. If you live above your means for too long, or you expend what you don't have, or you expend based on future income which may not be there, you will end up like what happened to Guyana in the past. They did exactly like this, and so by 1990, we were declared uncreditworthy. The debt stock was 9 times that of GDP. We're using 153% of revenue to service debt. This entire generation, all these people now, we lost development opportunities because the PPP government, from the time I went into finance to end the presidency, and even now, we are repaying APNU old debts for that period. That is what I'm saying. So it's not fallacious or flippant. I'm just saying it's sensible. At any unit of management, you have to live within your means. You can't, even in the home, if you want to eat like fancy food, steak from abroad every day and don't fix the step, that's your business. and or the roof, it would get a hole eventually. Or don't buy clothes, walk naked and eat the steak, every day. That's what I'm saying. Walk naked, don't buy any clothes. You have to balance all the spending. So I'm saying and you can't spend on one child, you get trouble in the family. So we have many children in government too, public servants, the farmers, the bauxite workers, the fishermen. We have many children too. You have to spend to ensure that everybody also benefit. You have to fix the roof as well as provide medicine in a hospital. I mean, like food or so for people. That's what I'm saying. I did this for Glenn Lal so he could understand it. I was using the home example, hoping he would understand. I was not being flippant and fallacious. And Jagdeo on remittances. Had his feet been planted firmly in local reality and he understood what was happening in Guyana. So a bunch of nonsense again. I'm saying go back to the report, go back to what the report said. The author of the report said that remittances are private capital would be considered private capital flow. Private capital flow comes in for several purposes. One, it's for consumption. Two, it's for investment. Private capital flows, if you look at balance of payment classification, consumption, investment. In our case, you've seen a massive inflow of remittances, increase in for investment purposes, and you see it reflected in other things. The way the Kaichor News article pointed out that, in spite of us producing jobs, people have to eat basically more from getting funds from abroad. They were not eating and linking higher remittances to people getting support for eating. It's not so. This is the same thing. Again, the article. 5 years later, Ghana still to implement IMF advice and collect capital gains tax intake. VP not bothered by companies selling stake. I'm saying, last week I explained that again, that this is a normal thing in business. It is a normal thing. People invest, they sell their shares, etc. If in the sale of the shares there's a capital gains tax, we're not talking about that they get it tax-free. They have to accord with the payment of the taxes whenever they transfer shares, if that is provided for by the law. That's a whole separate argument. We were talking about, you asked me about flipping, the Kaichor News about flipping investments. And I'm saying that if people invest, flipping, investing, selling shares is a feature of a modern world, a part of capital markets. That's how you have capital markets growing. In our case, we've been unable to have a big stock exchange in Guyana, which is another way for people to raise capital outside of loans, which is available to investors in other parts of the world, largely because we have too few publicly traded companies. And most of the companies are family-owned businesses, so they don't sell shares. They don't flip their shares. So then you don't have any mobility in the market. There are very few, a limited volume of transactions because of few publicly traded companies. That's why you can't develop a capital market. So it's a normal for anybody who wouldn't even write about this, because it's like reinventing the whole world and the fundamentals of economics again. But Kaichor, Glenn Lal, has done a lot of reinvention too, because he found a new feature for global warming. Exxon pouring hot water in the ocean, causing global warming in Guyana. So this is a new law of economics. Adam Lal Smith, now you got over there, He's a new founder of this. I can go on about all of this. Ghana will suffer from resource curse given government inaction on proper depletion policy, etc. Christopher. Depletion policy has nothing to do with the resource curse. The resource curse and depletion policy are two different things. Resource curse leads to the economy when you have this windfall, and it leads to the Dutch disease and kills off the other sectors. Depletion policy is something else, which I spoke of earlier. They have it wrong. Anyhow, I'm not going to go on more about these issues. Now, there's one last thing I want to deal with. I had no intention of addressing this, but I've seen Dennis Chabrol, since Dennis is here, Dennis published an opinion by Rear Admiral Gary Bess. And he was extremely critical of President Ali and the Argyle Declaration. If you read it, it was published 24th of December. Now, for a former chief of staff to write this is disgraceful. And, but I've come to expect that sort of behavior from some people. But I just want, if he questions just one paragraph. Put differently, did President Ali, in accordance with Guyana parliamentary approval, to only discuss a border controversy, needed to check back with the citizens of Guyana before committing to a declaration that includes the words territorial dispute? Did he therefore exceed his authority? So he's questioning the Argyle Declaration and whether the president exceeded his authority. Now, I've stayed away from sharing my real views on some of these issues, because at some point in time we may need to do it. But I want you to look at two documents, if you have the opportunity to. Dennis, you should look at the 1963 agreement between the British and Venezuelan foreign ministers, and then a document taken by Chedi Jagan to the cabinet. Well, it was the Council of Ministers on the 25th of February, 1964. And you will see that the gist of it, I'm not going to quote it, but the gist of it was that after Venezuela raised this issue formally at the UN, the British foreign minister met with the Venezuelan foreign minister, and they agreed, also consulted with the British Guyana, the leadership. They agreed, without any commitment, to have an individual go to examine the records in Venezuela to see whether they found any proof of what the Malay Prévost was saying, that the 1899 award could be nullified based on fraud. Now, a gentleman was sent, and he came back, and he said, I found not a shred of evidence. This is what he said. The main result of my visit to Caracas may therefore be summed up as showing that Dr. Falcon's claim in his United Nations speech that the recent discovery of extraordinarily important historical documents enable us to be acquainted with the history of the arbitral award is not justified. In fact, he took his stand on Malay Pervo's memorandum, which, however, contains only one new factor, which is only the writer's personal opinion that the award was influenced by a Russo-British deal. So far, the Venezuelan authorities have been unable to supply a single shred of evidence to support this opinion, and I feel confident that the references asked for by Sir Douglas Busk will not add any substance to an aged lawyer's flights of fancy, which he was suffering from the immediate aftermaths of the receipt of a high Venezuelan decoration. This was the finding, that this guy was talking nonsense. There's not a shred of evidence they found. And this is what the premier, who was Chedi Jagan, at that time invited the cabinet to do. He said, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, he said, third point of it, to decide what further steps should be taken to prevent any erosion of the stand taken at the United Nations in November 1962 by the United Kingdom government, and to resist Venezuelan maneuvers to secure a reopening of the frontier issue. Chedi Jagan, 1964, February. Resist any attempt because not a shred of evidence was found to reopen the border issue. This is after they sent, the British government with British Guyana sent an individual to check if they could justify it. And they found no evidence whatsoever. Would Gary Best pose the same question to Burnham that he did to President Ali? Under whose authority he signed the Geneva Agreement? That is the question he should ask. Whether he consulted with the people of our country too. The 1899 award is sacred. They couldn't find a single shred of evidence. Venezuela latches on to this Geneva Agreement, but the Geneva Agreement itself doesn't say that we recognize their contention. It says that, we should try to examine basically their claim that the award was null and void, the 1899 award. It didn't recognize their or accepted that view. But here you had a cabinet decision in 1964 saying should not do it anymore. If we start going down this route that Gary Best has done, we just would be playing into the hands of Venezuela. The 1899 award, based on all the historic documents, is sacred. It was done deal. It was accepted by everyone, Venezuela included. Their attempt to reopen it was done not on a shred of evidence, as we found that they sent a person to Venezuela to verify all that they claimed they had. The man said, no, not a shred of evidence. And this is only based on this man's flight of fancy. That's it. So Gary Best is now questioning all of that. And the issue about border controversy and stuff like that, we are clear about that, the word controversy. We keep using it. But the courts have already said in about 9 or 10 cases, even on the provisional relief that we sought, the same court that we are making, we're going to have a final resolution of this matter. that Venezuela doesn't want to go to refers to the issue as a dispute. So, I don't know if Gary Best read the provisional measures or the court ruling on the provisional measures that we sought. So trying to make, even as this day, the 24th, on Christmas Eve day, trying to address this matter in that manner. And when the country has basically, even the formal opposition has dealt with it, but trying to make it look, as though President Ali sold us out. It's just nonsense, pure nonsense. Thank you. Yes, sure.
Good afternoon, Trina Williams. Trina Williams, Guyana Chronicle. Guyana will be taking its seat on the United Nations Security Council next week. What are some key issues that the country intends to highlight at this level? And since we're on the topic of important...
Could you save those questions to Minister Todd when he has his press briefing? I don't want to... The ministers have the... Minister Todd can deal with the Security Council issues when his ministry does his end-of-year press conference. Today, I wanted more to focus on the political issues and give the ministers a chance so they can speak at length about their own sectors and portfolio. That is what I'm hoping, because for weeks now I've been pushing them to speak about their own portfolios. So I'll urge you to address Minister Todd, and he will tell you about the Security Council too. But it's a great thing for us. We're very pleased about being on the Security Council. It's a prized position, and I think we have outlined in a main some of the key areas that we want to focus on the Security Council. We've already outlined that. Yes, please.
Naomi Paris, Guyana Chronicle. There have been a lot of talks about the increase in cost of living, but could you quantify the direct investments by the government that would have resulted in Guyanese not feeling the full brunt of this?
Okay. So, as I explained before, if you look at inflation rates around the world, in the COVID period, they skyrocketed. Inflation rate around the world, including in the United States and Europe. If you look at here too in Guyana, we saw some major increases in food prices in that period. But because of what we did on the taxes, so on the VAT, as well as our approach to how taxes are levied, the base. And let me explain this, because I did before. So when the price for shipping a container of goods from China moved from $3,500 US to $20,000, we still use the $3,500 rate. So an importer now should have had the cost, the insurance, which would have been higher, and freight. And then you levy the taxes, the import duty, the common external tariff on that basis. So if the cost of the goods was $10 or $1,000, and say insurance $500, and then $20,000, that's US dollars, and $20,000 to ship it, the base would have been $21,500. And then you levy, say, a 10% tax on that. But instead of doing that, we kept the old rate, 3.5. So if the cost will be $1,000, that's 4 or 5, and then 500 for insurance. So the old base was $5,000. So a 10% tax on 5,000 instead of a 10% tax on $21,500. So that abated a lot of the increases that came about because of the cost of freight. People, that went unrecognized. Billions of dollars were waived because of this. Billions of dollars we lost because of this. Secondly, we removed the tax on fuel. The fuel prices skyrocketed. There was a 50% excise tax on fuel. We brought it down to 0. That is, again, billions of dollars, because fuel feeds into transport, it feeds into cost of production, and many other areas of life. So, even mining and economic activities. So we did that. Then we had removed the VAT on electricity and water, etc., and data. We then also we started subsidizing electricity and water. When the prices went up for fuel, the cost, the GPL and GWI also skyrocketed. But instead of getting a higher price for electricity or water, we kept the price constant. That cost, we absorbed all of these costs in the Treasury. Unlike, say, Suriname, which increased its electricity prices by, I think, a few 100%. Trinidad increased their electricity prices, etc. These were countries that had long had subsidized electricity. We kept our prices constant. So for the farmers, we gave them fertilizer. Now what happened is that some of them got free fertilizer, so $1 billion of fertilizer, when fertilizer prices skyrocketed globally, because fertilizer is derived from oil products, crude oil. So when the crude oil prices went up, fertilizer prices went up. So by assisting them with the fertilizer, they managed to still be profitable. Their cost of production did not go up as high. Therefore, their disposable income did not get affected as much. So then through the cash grants, through the system. So there were, I don't want to list all the measures. Maybe Ashni can do that, about all the measures that we took, which many other countries did not do. And that is why we helped to abate the cost. When the price of sand and stone went up, so stone prices skyrocketed, there was a shortage, $15,000, it was about $10,000 per ton of crushed run and stone. And now, the prices skyrocketed and there was a shortage. In the first year, we licensed about 9 new quarries. About 6 of those, this is a success story. 6 new quarries are either operating or started operating. The prices now have come down back to about $10,000 per ton of stone. So sand prices, when the prices skyrocketed, we said, we open up some government sand pits. We're going to do more of that. So that the prices were just jumping all the time. We're trying to get the prices to come down. In Berbice, it's a big problem. A ton of sand in Berbice is like over $4,000. So if you're buying a 30-ton, maybe truckload of sand, or 30, I think it's cubic, 30 cubic of sand in Berbice, not ton, cubic of sand. If you are buying that now, you pay $120,000 because their capacity to move large volumes is limited and the landing point. So we are now looking at licensing some more people with sand pits and getting bigger barges, incentivizing people to do bigger barges to land at different points on the coast in Berbice, not through the Kanji Creek, which has a limited draft. That will reduce the price. So we are working all the time at this. But we said, if this is the case, how do we help poor people now? How do we help them so they can continue building? That is why our building program, we announced 3 initiatives for low income. First of all, we're building low income houses ourselves and then giving it to people so they don't have to, they can mitigate the risks of having to do that. Secondly, we announced another policy that if you have a private piece of land anywhere in the country, the government can build on your land and then you go to the bank and you get the loan. That's the second policy. And the third one was the free cement and steel for the foundation for low-income housing. So that is to help to mitigate the cost to poor people. So if your prices went up a bit, but because you get free now cement and steel for the foundation, it helps to bring it back to even. So that's how we cushioned some of the cost of living increases or the increase in prices. Because why did these prices go up? Because of big demand. Everybody is constructing, which is in a good position to be because we generate a lot of jobs. The demand for sand and stone and everything else skyrocketed. So because of the nature of our government, we could have easily left it on our own. We made sure we were taking care of people, that they were not left behind, people who are now moving to build at that level. Every policy, almost every policy that we put in place, we're thinking through the consequences of these policies. We have reduced the cost of the rental of land, the cost for D&I services, a whole range of stuff to give more room to people on the ground. So those are just a few of the measures that we instituted. They run into billions of dollars. People don't see them visibly. When you, for example, the 50% reduction in tax in fuel, people don't count that because it's not an item in the budget, like how we set aside $5 billion directly for cost of living increases. You don't see that. It's not an item in the budget. But in effect, it has a massive impact on everyone. In everyone who uses the road, everyone who buys fuel, everyone who drives a car, it has an impact on them. And that's how we've managed in this country. Yes, please, Dennis.
Sir, in news coming to an end not so long ago, the Venezuelan president is asking that Guyana abandons the presence of the HMS Trident in Guyanese waters, and he's seeing this as a breach in the spirit of the agreement of Argyle, dealing with dialogue, diplomacy, and peace. And he's also ordered the activation of a joint defensive action of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces off the coast of the Essequibo. What is your reaction to this latest development? And would the government be asking the naval vessel not to come into the waters?
The president has been in touch with Prime Minister Gonzalez on this matter. He's made it clear that we support the Argyle Declaration in letter and spirit, that nothing that we did in the past or we will do in the future is to harm or will affect Venezuela and the territory of Venezuela. that these measures, a lot of these measures were long planned, and they are routine, and they are part of our building a defensive capability. Nothing that we do or we have done has threatened Venezuela. We don't plan on invading Venezuela. President Maduro knows this, and he needs not have any worry about that. That assurance was given to him in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we have done so before St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we'll continue to do so. Now, we don't have any plan to take offensive action against Venezuela. Whatever we do here has been routine and has been long planned, and it's part of our building a defensive capability in Guyana, not necessarily to fight wars, but to police better our exclusive economic zone and our territorial integrity and sovereignty. So we respect the Argyle Declaration, and President Maduro needs to understand this. No, the president has not asked that, asked the British vessel to move away from what was a planned activity and we see as routine, and which has no offensive intent against Venezuela.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Yes. Just a few quick questions. Firstly, will the government be heading to arbitration over the U.S. $214 million in questionable costs recovered by Exxon, as highlighted in the first audit report?
What is it?
Will the government be headed to arbitration over the U.S. $214 million in questionable costs recovered by Exxon, as highlighted in the first audit report?
If Exxon, right now we have a dispute over that sum. If Exxon decides to pay it or accept it, then we don't have an issue. If not, ultimately I see us ending up in arbitration.
Secondly, since the unauthorized reduction in the costs flagged by the auditors and the subsequent investigation, what methods and measures have been put in place to avoid reoccurrence?
I didn't get that again. What measures to prevent a reoccurrence of issues raised by the auditors? Now, the thing is that the auditors, I think what has happened, like this point about them using resources, those are strong things to me. Exxon using resources from the Starbuck block, which is ring-fenced, for activities in Kaichor and Kanji. For me, that is illegal based on the PSA. Should not happen. Therefore, we constantly have to be vigilant. Once Exxon continues to be an operator for other blocks outside of the Starbuck block, then we have to continue to be vigilant in every audit to see that that doesn't happen. Because they can say they are not using it. By law, they are not supposed to do this. By law, they are not supposed to do it. But if they do it, you can't just believe that in them to say, oh, we got assurances from them that they're not doing this. You constantly have to to check. And so the next audit too, the auditors will have to keep checking on this because it shouldn't happen. They would claim it didn't happen because there is a division over how many man hours or what people are working on. So if they bring one technical guy and he's working both on Stabroek block, but he does something for the Kaichor block, they may put all of it on the Stabroek block. We now have to see if he spent 10 man hours on the Kaichor block, that they accord that with they deduct that cost and accord it on and put it on the Kaichor block. So that is something you don't just listen to assurances. You have to verify every single time you do an audit. That is the purpose of an audit. It's verification to keep people honest.
Has government completed negotiations with the oil companies that participated in the recent bid round?
It's something, I think it's my ear, maybe. Yeah, go ahead again.
Has the government completed negotiations with the oil companies that participated in the recent bid round?
Oh no, they have not completed.
Is there a fixed price payment to Guyana for its crude oil, or is it based on the daily world pricing? If so, can you say what price is in US dollars do we pay per barrel?
Yeah, because this moves all the time. So it is a price based on an average of a few days. Okay? Yeah, and it's benchmarked. So anybody can check it.
Dr. Jagdeo, Antonio
Yes,
Day.
Brent.
Yeah. Dr. Jagdeo, good afternoon. Antonio Day from Stabroek News. I just have a question. I know that you would have said that the Minister of Natural Resources is expected to have a press conference, but I just wanted to know update on the Amila Falls Hydro project. Any headway with that?
Oh, I think we're still we may have received the proposals. When was it supposed to close? I haven't tracked that recently. We went out for expressions of interest. So what's the closing date for the expression of interest? What's the closing date?
I think it's supposed to be around October or November, if I'm correct.
Check it there. Check it and
I remember.
give me a feel. If that's the case, then I'm not sure that we have reached the closing date for the expression of interest. Huh? December 29. Okay, so we haven't reached that date as yet. You see, you should have done that. Okay.
Yeah. Secondly, in relation, going back to COP29, of course, you would have raised concerns about being disappointed in the outcome of not addressing adaptation and whatnot. But I wanted to know, could you say offhand if the government has made any progress in terms of us moving from carbon fuel to green fuel?
From carbon
fuels to green fuels.
Okay. So we have an energy mix that we have outlined already as part of our national development strategy. And the energy mix focuses on gas as a major transitional fuel, but as base load, hydropower, solar, and some wind to a lesser extent. We believe we could triple install capacity now, or maybe quadruple install capacity and still cut our emissions by about 50%. So that is important for us, that whilst we are pursuing an energy transition, that we're effectively going to replace almost our entire generating capacity, which now is run on bunker C and diesel. They're two most polluting fuel. So in the future, we will not rely on bunker C and diesel, which are the most polluting fuel. We're also looking at some biodiesels. We have some project with India and the biodiesel to look at a blend for even transportation. So, yes, so those are the things that we're looking at as part of our energy mix. Yeah, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo Shervin, Belgrave Culture News. Given the fact that Guyana doesn't have its own metering system in place on Exxon facilities, how do we know how much crude oil is being shipped to ExxonMobil refinery in the U.S.?
So, so first of all, this is something that we have. We do have people on the ship who are monitoring this. We do have people there on the ship who are monitoring it. I made it clear to you that we'd probably have to use more technology in the future to track a real-time progress on production, etc. But these are easily reconcilable figures, and our auditors this information should be available to our auditors. So you recall the last audit that was done when they requested Exxon daily production figures. They said, we're not giving you that because the government already has that. The government gets the production figures on a daily basis. It's easily, these are publicly traded companies. It's easy to reconcile production figure with sale figure globally. And if there is a disparity between the two or discrepancy between the two, then that's clearly a case of fraud. We have not found any fraud so far. But your point about about strengthening our monitoring on the production itself is well taken, and I addressed that earlier in the year when I said we're completing the series of reform of the framework which we did when we passed the Petroleum Activities Bill, and now we have to strengthen the day-to-day management. Now the new PSA also forces, although Exxon is the fiscal terms don't apply to them, but a lot of the other management terms, in light of, for example, regular supply of data, clarity around supply of data, all of that, they are strengthened. And so that needs to be worked on now in the ministry. But it's a point well taken. We're advancing that. The fiber optic cable from the FPSOs landed, they were here, and that will be a major, major change here because once the headquarters are completed, you'd have an operating room here that will mirror what is happening offshore. So all production flows, etc., could be seen right here at Ogle about what's happening offshore. It's a control center. So you'll be able to do everything. You'll probably be able to, I don't know, remotely shut down things and stuff from just here. And that project is advancing. So as soon as the headquarters is completed, you saw some digging. They're going under the highway to bring in the cable now, the fiber optic cable. That would make a big difference to us. Right now, we're in discussion with a couple of people, but most likely you'll have to go to tender for a system using satellite technology because we don't have that cable as yet. But later we can probably use the same cable to do the things that you're saying.
The headquarters you're speaking about is ExxonMobil headquarters, right?
Yes, yes.
But is there any plan, like, by the government to have its own
yes,
thing
we
apart?
have that's why I was saying we're hoping to get a connection with the cable. We can have our own way of doing it, but we have to monitor what's going on in there too, both places. Control center. We have people on the FPSOs, the standards people are there. We have to keep those there on the FPSO. We have to be in their control center, and we have to have our own control center. Or not control center, but monitoring station.
Dr. Jagdeo, the opposition has criticized the government for bending certain legal requirements and provisions of the contract with ExxonMobil for Exxon's benefits. Like, for example,
Who in the opposition said this, and who in the opposition?
well, normally when they have their press conference.
No, but who said that? Who?
Well, the guys, what's his name, Mr. Lowe? Who,
Well, Lowe, what did Lowe say?
well, the opposition, I'm going to say in general, the opposition.
No. I want to know what Lowe said. Tell
said-
me a person so I can know
All right,
if
good.
it's authorized or not. Lowe may be Norton saying, as far as I know, Norton is the leader of the opposition. You sure Norton agrees with that?
Well, I am not part of the APNO. I just.
Oh, yeah,
know
but
that-
did you ask Norton, sir, do you agree with what Mr. Lowe said? Lowe could be a maverick. He was a sour man, yeah.
Okay, one of my colleagues just texted me and said that Dr. Adams said this too.
So you have a direct line. Who is it that texts you all the time? I see they text you all from the Kaichor News. Is it Glenn Lal? Can't be Glenn Lal, not the text. I think he'd have a hard time using text. So who you have in there who sends you these messages? You have them monitored? So,
yeah, just like we have
is
to
the whole
real-time monitoring
Kaichor
for
News
Exxon.
monitoring these press conferences?
Of course.
All right, I'm flattered. Go ahead. Right,
Good.
go ahead.
The question is that the government has bended. This is what the opposition is claiming, Mr. Vincent.
Right, no. Go
It
ahead.
says
go ahead.
that it shows that the government has believes that this shows disregard for the country's rule of law. And some of the examples they made was like the challenge for the parent company guarantee and the no feasibility for study for the gas project. What is your response to that?
Far from the truth. If anybody was complicit with Exxon, it was the APNO when they signed the agreement. I made it clear. You yourself have been putting out about that. What's a Clyde and Company report? You published the Clyde and Company report. Did you show Lowe that and say, how come you all did this overnight? Exxon drafted the cabinet memo for you. Did you ask him that? When you talk about complicity, that's complicity. That's your first question. Let's move on.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
You previously said that Exxon would have to return the money. This is on the
You're going back with the same thing, man. I just dealt with the complicity. This man talking nonsense here when he said you're complicit.
Okay. No, this one's separate. This is in relation to the $240 million that were flagged by the auditors. You said that if Exxon would have to return the money to a cost bank, that was not recoverable and no further action will be taken. You've said this at a previous press conference.
What? That no further action will be taken?
Yeah, you had said
No. You misrepresenting what I said. Your criminal action is different than financial liability. That's two different things. That's what Kaichor don't think. We have a dispute over the money. It has to end up, if you can't settle it, it goes to arbitration. There is no give on that. That's provided for by the contract. But if you have a dispute over the classification, because we're saying they classified it in a manner that's not consistent with the PSA, whether it rises to the level of criminality is another matter, but not that they're not liable financially for it. So that's the nuances, man. You all got to get these nuances right.
Okay.
Not that we're not taking any action there.
All right. Well, that
I
was
just
my,
answered that question. All right.
my final question.
Okay, all right, that would be a final question. Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Jagdeo, you've been very critical of the opposition over the years. Has the PPP, has your party and yourself done any introspection on the PPP's performance and plan to make changes for the new year? Since everything in life has changes and most of the time it adds up, you know, at the end of the year and people plan what new and different they're going to do for the new year?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that it's not like we make plan to lose weight, go to the salon and stuff like that. You know, people do those things at year end, get a nice hairstyle. In our case, we have outlined through our manifesto and our plans what we want to achieve. So it is remaining consistent with that. It's the people who drift in the wind, who latch on to any issue that they think popular, that you have to be worried about. So one day it's Rick Ford Bork, another day it is the 6.5%, another day it is saying we are complicit with Exxon. It is those people who drift in the wind. We're not a party that drifts in the wind. Of course, given the level of public works, we have to ensure we get greater efficiency, value for money. We have to make sure that some people deliver on their work on time, the contractors. Those are all operational things that we have to improve on. You have to constantly improve on your operation. Fighting the corruption. We got cases where the president was telling me in a portfolio review, he found out that you had cases where people, the contractors said they go to a public works and half of the project has been done or done by another agency, those kinds of things. Because we have thousands of these roads being built and etc. You would have the constant need to operationally improve your efficiency. The ministries, the PSs, get things done on time, make people payment. People work, sometimes they don't get their payment. On Christmas Eve, I think it was Christmas Eve, I can't remember the day, State House, what day I did a walkabout. And so I'm there at State House, and I got a call from Linden. I got a text. 700 of the part-time workers didn't receive their pay. So I saw the REO down here, and I said, go back home and get people paid tonight. Imagine we're approaching Christmas, that was almost Christmas Eve, and people not receiving their pay. All kinds of excuses, oh, this region, the tons of excuses we get often. Now, that was 700 odd people who would have not get their money for Christmas. This sort of thing needs to be improved all the time in government. Government is not perfect. You got to constantly push people to do often what they do. I've seen contractors who finish their work waiting for payment. The people have a loan. They can't get their money paid on time. Some engineer doesn't go on time to assess their work. We've seen cases where you have shoddy work, the engineers don't go, people get paid for it. All the time you have to improve on that. But on the goals that we set ourselves, those are constant. Improving people's more and better job, more scholarships, more education, better health care, proper infrastructure, cheaper, reliable electricity. Those are constant goals that we work every year in each budget to get us closer to those goals. So you're not going to see drifting all over the place. You see consistency, more housing, etc. But on you're right, on operational efficiency, we constantly have to work at this. This is not something that you could rest and say, oh, we are pleased about it all the time. So there is a lot of room for improvement in these areas.
Dr. Jagdeo, it's your last press conference, and a number of questions have been asked, and a lot of times the news agencies try to create hysteria in our society. One of the things that is looming over Guyana and constantly need to be looked at is investors' confidence, because all that goes on in our country and our development is hinged on investors' confidence. What confidence or what would you reiterate to investors as we go into the new year?
We have absolutely no problem with that. We meet with people a lot and we get a feedback from the private sector. We get a lot of feedback from the private sector because we work to engage people all the time. We've seen people go invest into our missions abroad, and we have not seen any change in terms of interest and flow of investment dollars into Ghana. In fact, every day we're seen as a better destination for investments and long-term investments. And that's why it's important too that the government sends clear signals about how we will manage the economy, macroeconomy, the safety of people's capital here, their ability to repatriate the capital, the sanctity of contracts, the predictability in policies. All of these things are a hallmark of PPP governments of the past. You can't say the same of APNU, and that is why we always suffered from low investments when they're in office. People don't want to come and invest because they never have that certainty. With us, we've made it clear, and we need that because the investable capital in this country is limited, but we're so pleased that people have leverage. I spoke earlier about the shore-based operations. All of them are majority owned by Guyanese. Several of the new hotels are owned, international hotels are owned by Guyanese. Almost all the housing units being built for rentals are owned by Guyanese to the oil and gas companies. We've seen a growth in the logistics company, construction companies. There's a past when we didn't have many construction companies. Warehousing, massive investment in warehousing. Guyanese are making these investments. More of our people are working in the oil and gas industry or in industries that supply services to this sector. There's been a massive growth in agriculture for that matter. Look at the massive soy and corn project that people are working on, hydroponics. We're looking at a dairy industry now. We've had 3 major interests. So I'm very pleased with the level of investments, and not just in oil and gas, but almost in every area, because the country needs all of these services. But we have not seen any abatement of investment flows or anything of that sort. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. And a Happy New Year to all Guyanese.